masters, dependents, lodgers of all sorts. For me, what's important about daily life and about culture is that it forms an enormous and enormously complex pattern which is influenced all the time by the big currents, the great swirling currents of big history out there, conquests and wars, high politics. These aren't just things that affect the elite. They don't just affect the big history books, but they penetrate to a very banal level of daily life, which reforms itself all the time as history changes.
From the villas of the Romans to the lineage compounds of Teotihuacan to the thatched roof huts of the Maya, households have always been part of larger political and economic systems. Household archaeology reveals that changes in politics and economics affect our choices about who we live with, the most personal decision of all.
Annenberg Media.
The National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Science Foundation.
For information about this and other Annenberg Media programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org. Annenberg Media.
The National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Science Foundation. Human beings are all one species. We are all equally capable of language, creativity, and thought. The differences among us lie in our cultures, our beliefs, how we organize our societies, and how we make our living. Humans have populated every environment on Earth. We live on the frozen tundra and in the searing deserts. We live in thriving cities of millions and in isolated camps of a few dozen. Some societies seem simple because they are small, and their members are self-sufficient and use simple tools. Others seem complex because they have large populations, and people depend on each other for food and goods and use sophisticated technology. In between, there is a range that fills the spectrum. All of these differences are cultural, learned behavior. the result of a complex interaction between our inventiveness and our natural environments. As we search for new horizons, our inventiveness thrusts us across the boundaries of space into new worlds. This new view of Earth dispels an ancient myopia, the artificial boundaries of our states and the politics that often divide us. Here is a vision of one planet and one family of humankind. But the view from Earth reminds us of a common human dilemma, the rise and fall of our many ways of life. Here, among the ruins of ancient civilizations, archaeologists are retracing the steps in a long and shared human odyssey. Across two worlds, the old and the new, they are discovering the independent spark of the human genius, the many times and places that we have created grand civilizations. Ancient Egypt. As early as the 18th century, scholars came here to marvel at and study the great relics of the ancient Sun Kings. Laboring among the pyramids and temples of this old world civilization, early archaeologists speculated that complex civilizations were created in the Near East to spread far and wide. They thought the Greek city-states, the Roman Empire, and all the civilizations that followed were the inheritors of a single act of creation. But discoveries in the New World would provide a stunning challenge to this myopic vision of human history. In 1839, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, explorers John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood encountered the realms of the ancient Maya. Europeans were amazed by Catherwood's written descriptions of ancient Maya cities. Architecture, sculpture, and painting, all the arts that embellish life, had flourished in this overgrown forest. Who built this city? In the ruined cities of Egypt, the stranger knows the story of the people whose vestiges are around him. America, say the historians, was peopled by savages. But savages never reared these structures, never carved these stones. We asked the Indians who made them, and their answer was, "Quien sabe?" Who knows? During the next century, other explorers revealed the amazing variety of New World civilizations. A great city, Teotihuacan, dominated the basin of Mexico. Atop a hill in the valley of Oaxaca sits Monte Alban, the royal center of a mighty kingdom. And in the forests and jungles of Guatemala, Maya city-states once reigned over thousands of square miles. This is Mesoamerica. At about AD 700, three great civilizations had emerged here. The realms of the Maya, the power of the great city of Teotihuacan, the Zapotec kingdom of Monte Alban. For many scholars, the differences between new and old world civilizations suggested an independent course of history, that each evolved on its own. This led to another and deeper insight. Beneath these differences may lie a grand and universal similarity, a parallel course of human evolution throughout the world. We now know that all humans once lived nomadic lives. We gathered wild plants and followed the migrations of animals. Our lives were lived in small bands. Everything was shared. No one had more power or wealth than anyone else. 10,000 years ago, people began to farm and live in permanent settlements. Soon, villages, towns, and cities evolved, and life changed. Thousands lived within city walls. We specialized in a single task and depended on others for everything else we needed. In time, we became divided into rich and poor as our human relationships became ever more complex. Archaeologist William Sanders.
I think all human societies are the product of a process of cultural evolution. In general, this evolution leads to an increase in the size of societies, an increase in the complexity of their interaction and institutions. It also leads to more interdependence, more economic interdependence among households within a society and among societies.
To trace the evolution of human societies in the New World, an archaeological team comes here to Mexico's Tehuacan Valley. The team is led by veteran archaeologist Scotty McNeish. They are seeking evidence of the first inhabitants of the valley. When McNeish first excavated here in 1962, he discovered a time capsule of human occupation at a site called Puron Cave.
Here we are back at Puron Cave. Really haven't dug in it in almost 30 years. Walls all preserved. Even the trowel marks we made to mark off strata are still preserved, and we have all sorts of neat floors of charcoal, one on top of the other. The amazing thing about this cave is that we really have unbelievable preservation. The reason we have preservation is it's so dry in this area that the bacteria of decay that destroy things can't live. So anything that's dropped in here, it dries up and dehydrates and lasts forever.
As McNeish dug deep into the cave, traces of an early people emerged from an archaeological stratum he called El Riego.
Here's our El Riego layer, 8,600 years old. Now in it, we not only have a date in terms of the year, but we have some idea of what part of the year. Here are grass seeds that flower and meet fruition, which they brought in here sometime in July and August. We have fruits of Costa Rica that reach fruition October, November. Here's a chupandilla. There's one right in front of the cave that's fruiting right now in mid-November. So, from these plants coming out of this layer, plus the artifactual evidence, it looks very likely that this layer was occupied somewhere between July and November.
In November, the dry season begins. The landscape around Puron becomes a searing desert. There is no water. Even cactus are barren of fruit. During the dry season, the ancient residents must have abandoned Puron Cave to seek water, plants to gather, and animals to hunt. McNeish believes they came here, to another cave that overlooked an oasis, constantly watered by underground springs. Mexican archaeologist Angel Garcia Cook excavated the cave with McNeish. Cook is now director of the Mexican Institute of Archaeology.
Yeah, que bueno. Yes, el tipo flaco. Yeah.
This projectile point indicates that this cave was occupied at the same time as Puron Cave, about 5000 BC. Clues to the diet of the cave's ancient residents also began turning up.
Bueno, este es un pedazo de This is a piece of maguey that was cooked over a fire and then chewed. It was a species of cactus that they chewed and then spat out. Sometimes you can see the mark of people's teeth on these quids, so maguey was clearly a part of the diet of the people that came here at a certain season of the year. This is a leaf of nopal cactus, which you can find during all the seasons. But there are times when people eat it more often because there's nothing else to eat.
Nopal still grows just outside the cave. McNeish's workmen remembered droughts when they ate nopal to stave off hunger and thirst. They called the cactus starvation food. So discovering cactus in the cave tells the archaeologists it was occupied during the dry season, when both food and water were scarce.
Otro pedazo. Pretty good, not bad. Needs a little sauce.
The most precise evidence that this was a dry season camp is a tiny hollow bone.
This is the bone of a bird, perhaps a duck, which migrates to this region each year only in the winter, during the dry season. All this is evidence of the food that they had in this cave and indicates that it was occupied in the dry season, in autumn and winter.
Until recently, another living culture was still following a nomadic way of life. These are the Kung Bushmen of South Africa. They provide some clues as to what daily life might have been like in the ancient Tehuacan Valley. In the rainy season, the desert blooms. The men hunt, and the women gather nuts and berries. The Kung call this the season of full stomachs and celebrate with dance and song. But during the dry season, the Kung must camp near a few permanent water holes. Every drop of moisture is precious. In the searing heat, they gather deeply buried roots. The Kung survived here by blending their lives with the seasonal availability of the animals they hunt and the plants they gather. It is an ancient way of life. Archaeologist William Sanders.
If you look at human history, over the past 2 million years, you can think of it in terms of two major revolutions. One going back where man first started using tools, and then from then on, all the work that was performed was primarily human labor. And then the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, when you start harnessing all other kinds of energy. During that long block of time, from a couple of million years ago until the Industrial Revolution, there was a point about 10,000 years ago when human beings began to farm, began to practice agriculture. And that harnessed a lot more energy than was possible by just hunting and gathering wild resources.
In the Old World, we know that agriculture sparked the development of the world's first cities in places like Sumer in ancient Mesopotamia. But how did farming begin in the New World? When Scotty McNeish first came to the Tehuacan Valley in 1962, he was seeking the answer to one simple question. Did agriculture evolve here, or was it introduced from the Old World?
And then we'll measure out from the corner set of stakes. Put a set of stakes in.
In a stratum of the Puron cave that had been laid down thousands of years later than those in which he found the hunters and gatherers, McNeish made a discovery that exceeded all expectations.
This is a corn cob, and it's a real little one.
It may have looked insignificant, but the shriveled ear dated to about 5000 BC. It was the earliest evidence of farming ever discovered in the New World. Since corn is a staple crop, it would have allowed a nomadic hunting-gathering way of life to evolve into a settled agricultural one. Corn slowly evolved in the New World from tiny ears like the one McNeish discovered, to the size we know today. Like staple crops of the Old World, such as wheat and barley, corn has a wonderful property. Corn can be dried and stored to provide food year-round. Corn can also be produced in abundance, so populations grew. Step by step, a new way of life took hold. Permanent settlements evolved. Simple shelters became substantial dwellings to protect young and old alike. McNeish returns to the valley where he found the first corn. He is now seeking evidence of the earliest permanent settlement, perhaps the beginnings of a village. A few miles from the caves, in the Ahalpan clay pits, McNeish spots a familiar pattern. High in this wall is a blackened layer of charcoal, and just above it, the cobblestone floor of an ancient house. The floor dates to 3000 BC, 2,000 years later than the hunter-gatherer settlements in the caves.
What we're getting here is a big piece of burned clay. It's lying on top of the floor, and is, from looking in here, is a piece of the wall. What they did is they took clay, and like the Hebrews in ancient Egypt, put grass in the clay, and then plastered it on the sticks, which were the wall of the house. It's very much the same system the Indians up in the country have today. We'll get the shape of the house and the post holes, so we'll know a lot about this very simple first kind of houses in a permanent village.
The cobblestone floors McNeish discovered would have been the foundations for small mud and thatch houses, like these. A settlement like this marks a dramatic turning point, when early farmers begin to abandon their nomadic way of life for a settled one.
So Ahalpan, in fact, is what Mao Zedong would call the first great leap forward from when people were food collectors to when people were food producers. And once you are food producers, why, the sky's the limit in terms of moving on to civilization. But this step has to happen before you can go on.
With the advent of agriculture, different societies all over Mesoamerica began to evolve cultures of enormous complexity. On the western border of what is now Honduras lies the ancient Maya city of Copan. These are the same ruins described with wonder by Stevens and Catherwood in the 19th century. Today, an international team of archaeologists has converged at Copan to mount a massive scientific expedition. The objective is to discover what happens to a society when agriculture gives it the ability to become larger and more complex than ever before.
And according to her map, that over there is where she found that one tomb that she took out, where we got that really good skeleton.
Right.
William Sanders and colleague David Webster are about to excavate a sprawling set of ruins that has lain abandoned and covered by weeds and brush for more than 1,000 years. Beneath what appears to be a natural hill, these archaeologists believe may lie the ruins of an ancient building. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the first clues begin to emerge. These strange figures are portraits of spirits that once adorned a magnificent carved bench, a throne upon which a Maya lord sat in council and judgment.
On these huge blocks, too.
Yeah.
There's only
Mega rocks.
three altogether. And then remember, Evelyn's, the tomb she found on the other building was right along the front of the terrace, starting outside of it and then going underneath it. So
The buildings begin to give up their secrets. Here, the archaeologists believe, lived a noble family. Maya royalty often buried their ancestors in a place of honor just in front of their dwellings. A burial is just now being uncovered. It may contain definitive clues to the status of the people who once lived here. Deciphering the clues requires the special expertise of forensic archaeology.
I just pulled the rest of the dirt out of the femur.
Okay, that's good. That's what it is, all right, the femur. Hey, you're lucky.
Near the elite buildings at Copan, archaeologists have now discovered many burials.
Good. Anything else?
The rest of it's
They are the special province of physical anthropologist Rebecca Story.
I have here some skeletons from an elite compound in Copan. One of the things we like to be able to tell is gender, because being able to tell males from females is useful in reconstructing social organization. Our best evidence on the skeleton actually comes from the pelvis, which has to be wider in females because of the needs of childbirth. One way, easy way we can tell sex is to use the sciatic notch right here and to use what we call our rule of thumb. Stick your thumb in. If it moves, it's a female. If you put your thumb in and it doesn't move, it's a male. Normally, I would expect to find equal numbers of males and females. However, in this case, I found twice the number of females to males. And in one patio, there were 15 females and only 2 males. The best explanation for this disparity is probably that the males of the household had more than one wife. Having multiple wives is common among elite Maya, and wives would be seen as a form of wealth. This is additional evidence that that was an elite compound.
Over the last 10 years, excavations have revealed a series of elite compounds, each one a complex of temples, workshops, and residences. Like old world palaces, archaeologists believe that these were the dwellings of Maya lords and their retainers. Archaeologist David Webster.
This person would have been the head of one of the major political subdivisions of the Copan political system. He would have been a noble just below the rank of king. He has his own sculptured facades on his buildings. He has a sculptured bench. He's got his own titles. He's able to enjoy altars and status symbols of all kinds in his compound here. He was probably polygynous, probably had a number of wives and concubines. So he was a very important person indeed, and there were probably a number of people like him in this political system who dominated other courtyards with similar political followings.
Maya society is no longer egalitarian as were the hunter-gatherers. Now there are people with more wealth and power than others. One of the consequences of cultural evolution is the creation of social